Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Sherville. I'm the director for Merit. Merit is an education research center, which sounds a little bit off-putting. But really what we're trying to do is build a community of people who are engaged and interested in education scholarship, where education innovation might take you. If you want to know a little bit more about Merit, it's at merit.mcmaster.ca. These are the types of events that we want to be a part of, support. And so if this is your kind of people, these are the kind of conversations you're interested in, we'd love to have you as part of our community. Our Inclusion for Normative Education Research Day, for NERD, ends with 2 sessions where we get to profile some of the interesting work that's happening across our Faculty of Health Sciences. Then we're going to offer a few awards, and then we'll conclude with an opportunity for you to get some feedback so that NERD 2027 can be even more spectacular than what today did. Our first presentation is from the Department of Surgery. It's a symposium speaking to the innovation and creativity and the educational opportunities offered by this department. I think what will be interesting is as you sit there and have an opportunity to reflect on where surgery is imagining the future could be, it's an opportunity for you to understand how can I take some of these ideas back to my own program, my own department, my own school. Where are there opportunities for collaboration? What are the next questions and conversations you might want to have? And so with this, I'd like to introduce the chair of the Department of Surgery, Dr. Mohit.
So, thank you very much, Jonathan. And what I'd like to do, if I could, is just start with you, actually. In coming here, surgery generally hasn't had a lot of engagement in the way we think we should be with Merit and education research. We have education researchers in our department, but I think this is an opportunity today to really foster bridges. And I'm grateful to you and grateful to the group here to be able to engage us in this way. But 2 things that strike out: high impact and high value education. How do we take what we're doing with the help of education scientists and move forward? So I'm going to give you very short, I want 15 minutes here, tell you a little bit about the department. Give you the case for why we think creativity is really important for us. Talk about 4 areas where we think we can build education research, and then talk about the value of this network itself. Surgery itself has its own mission, and I'll leave it basically at, we're very interested in this idea of creativity. And this idea of creativity became so fundamentally important, it became the 6-pillar strategy in our department, in thinking about how we will actually, not imagine, but something very, very active, create. And you can see where we would sit that. But today would be a lot about education that inspires and research that impacts. But you can see, even through entrepreneurship and innovation, there's lots of opportunities for us to be ultimately making that difference. This is our annual report, magazine, so to speak. And in that, we highlight just the types of things we're doing. At a very, very high level, we believe that our department's culture ultimately guides its purpose. So we really, really doubled down on this idea of when everyone participates, everyone wins, and we are all creative at its core. So at a very high level, we're a pretty conventional program in surgery in that we focus a lot on the standard traditional metrics, and in the last 5 years we've had some success, obviously, with bringing in research. Largely, this research is driven often by large clinical trials and large clinical trial data sets. I would say in surgery, probably 2 or 3 of our divisions are world-renowned for running these large programs. And we're really been fostering, ultimately building the next generation of surgical scientists. That being said, education is equally important. And I think today is, in setting in front of this audience, many of you who are really, really thoughtful scientists and educators, I'd like you to look at what we're trying to do and look at the potential that you see, well, we can help them. We can actually do something meaningful to work with this particular group. So here's the case for creativity and why we have doubled down so much on creativity. The critical issues that we are likely to face are the ones we have no idea are coming. My humble opinion is, I'm not going to trust AI to help predict the future, but I think it's going to be very, very valuable to help us consolidate all the information we have. We need humans in this play. Let me ask you this. What was life like before November 2022? Well, I can tell you, I started seeing this thing pop up. I said, I have no idea what this is. It said ChatGPT. I thought it was some sort of meme. Quite frankly, I thought, Within 4 months, there were over just under 2 billion users. And here we are, right? It's accelerating at a pace we would. And then people tell us, oh, don't worry, AI is not going to take your job, right? Don't worry about AI. People using AI are going to take your job. And then there's this movement, okay, well, how do we get, we've had a whole symposium. In surgery, we were really thinking about what are we going to do here. Creatives, though, will say, hey, AI is reasonable, but great breakthroughs have come from people that were unreasonable. And fundamentally, I think that gets back to this idea that, of course, we all have to learn something. In surgery, we're doing everything possible with programs, which I'll share with you, to engage our members, you know, from our students all the way through to our senior scientists, for example, our senior surgeons, in creative ways, to get them thinking creative. Here's the challenge we all face, folks. It's a reality. The same tests given to children and adults, we don't do that well. So what's happening in our system that is changing that? And I will tell you, this fellow isn't always our friend, to be truthful. And there's been lots of challenges. And what they did, I think, that was fundamentally evil in social media, is they said, we have to find a way to get people coming back again and again and again because they have to monetize that platform. And it became very clear that it's an addiction, and there's all kinds of consequences to these challenges. This is what's happening. Right? This is what we're fighting right now. We're fighting this in surgery, we're fighting this with our trainees, we're fighting this with our undergraduate students. What's the average attention span, folks? What do you think it is right now? Yell it out.
What was the question again?
What's the 8 seconds? That's what's 8 minutes, that's not too bad. You know what's depressing? You know what's depressing about this number? A goldfish will teach you longer than you can look at a goldfish. This is what we're fighting, folks. This is what we're fighting. We are always on, but never deeply engaged. That's the challenge we face. So we're focusing, and this gets back to the 4 bridges I'm going to share with you quickly here. We're focusing on, okay, what do we do in surgery? We got to do a bit less, not more. We've got to slow down a bit and reflect on where we actually want to go in an age that is just rapidly flying by us. AI is here, it's not going away. And then ultimately, how do we find good, meaningful quality indicators to move this forward? So these are 4 bridges. I'm going to go through these very quickly. But there are 4 programs that we think would love to get input. And I think the creativity of education researchers would be fabulous in these areas. So Invest, again, is one of our pillars of entrepreneurship. We've been putting residents through it, but it's innovation, entrepreneurship, and surgical training. It's a program that we're developing within our surgical foundations course. But there's lots of opportunity for engagement, lots of opportunity for education innovation to be taught at this group, and lots of opportunity for research. So we have a little paper that's come out that's just giving us the principles of where we go. But I'd love for any of you who have an interest in saying, I'm interested in education also as an entrepreneurial opportunity for us to be thinking. So the opportunity we think are entrepreneurial pursuits in education, licensable instruments that we can get some support with in these areas, curriculum as a product, and obviously ed tech and training. We're getting lots of that at this meeting, but those are areas where we would love to build some bridges. Number 2, Creative Cafe. That's what we're calling it. Creativity advanced by fostering others. We believe very strongly that creativity ultimately is the driver. In fact, our new president, Susan Pye, in her opening oration said, McMaster's university's traditions are bold creativity. By the way, anytime I see the word creativity, I'm just going to put it in here because I believe it suits my purpose to do that, but I will tell you, it's not uncommon to see curiosity, innovation, and creativity used across a lot of vision statements. In the age of artificial intelligence, as amazing as it's going to be, the greatest differentiator, we believe, is going to be being human. So how do we advance that? Well, here's the challenge. You saw that paper that said, you know, as we go further in training, our creative abilities are actually declining. And if you look at this, it's fascinating, the work that we've done with Warren Kalick in the School of Business, as well as some of our PhDs at the Creative Cafe. A paper that basically says, the more experience you get in surgery, the less fundamentally originally you become. And someone would say to you, and actually one of the folks came up and said, well, there are 3 people I do not want to be creative. I don't want my airline pilots to be creative, I don't want military personnel to be creative, and I don't want my surgeons to be creative. So that is built into the way we train. But Harvard picked this up and said, there's something going on here. and we should be doing something about it. We should be looking and thinking about deeply about how do we foster creativity and science around creativity in this situation. So we've been working on definitions of creativity. This is work that's happening with Alice Devine. We've got papers that are coming out. We have 14 submitted, so we're growing this. And so we're very excited. So the opportunity we hope, and we put out to the group here at Merit, is we'd love, whether you're a faculty or a graduate student interested in collaborating on creativity research, we would love the insights, the advice, and the collaboration. We have a center opening up, should be opening up in June, July. We'll be ribbon cutting it probably in summer, some point, called Innovation by Design, Evidence and Acceleration. That's where we're going to be focusing all of this work. And then we really want to build those partnerships. The other thing here is this accelerator. So we've done some work outside. So the president of the American University of Antigua and I met, and then that led to a few other interactions. And that basically led to this idea that can you take an intense 48-hour in-person experience, small group mentored, with some sessions, and can we get publication-ready manuscripts? To get people truly in the boot camp of writing and learning, and trying to get them hooked on to research. And we've had a couple of these sessions already. And I will tell you that in a group of like 250 students, of which 15 take it, that 15 has dominated the academic profile of that year's class. And they're winning awards, they're presenting this work, they've been hooked, right? Some of them have been hooked on this idea that research is important, asking questions is important. So again, finding ways to, we're out there doing this stuff, but we'd love to have some partnerships around, can we evaluate this? How do we brand this better? How do we think about this, from the education and research point of view, and evaluate it? So expansion, education and research topics, and mentors who might be interested in joining us in this. And I pitched the idea of having a leadership accelerator for students, very similar to what we're doing next. That was taken with great interest as well. So leadership and education, all those sorts of things are opportunities. And the fourth is a group of students right up here. And they're the first cohort of a program we started in surgery called sort of the Program for Undergraduate Learning in Surgery and Evidence. And it was meant to fundamentally just be a program for teaching principles of research to first and secondary university students. What became fascinating to me, that it became more than that. And in fact, in discussions and talking to, when we're piloting this idea, it's more about project learning, it's more having a different passion. It's about having conversations with exceptional individuals in our university environment that they can have chats with. It's about having these real-life roundtables, live sessions and pulse unplug, all these things that we've done to try to create a holistic experience of what it means to be, ultimately doing science and research and experience as a McMaster. What's particularly exciting is you might think, well, these are all McMaster undergraduates. In fact, the majority are not McMaster undergraduates. These are students coming in from schools neighboring us. And by the way, they're not all interested in medicine. Many are, fair enough. But there are many who aren't, right? They're coming here to explore and find mentors, find partners, and find opportunities. So we would ask, again, if you have an interest at a graduate student level to participate, say, I'd like to be part of that and help mentor, I'd like to help maybe be a research mentor to one of these students, or I would like to have a little catalyst conversation, we'd be very interested to hear from you. Last few slides here. Ultimately, none of this matters if you don't create high-value networks. I believe that, talking with Dr. Shimino, that Merit can be a very high-value network for surgery. As a department, I think we need to really lean in more to doing this. And I think the fundamental opportunities here are simple. When we have junior researchers who co-author work with top scientists, McMaster has no shortage of top scientists, they will always enjoy a persistent and competitive advantage the rest of their careers compared to similar individuals who did not have that early advantage. So we're trying to find value and opportunities for these individuals to get those very high value networks. And I think this is an opportunity for us. And at the end of the day, folks, when all of us, right, we all try to do something that's better than we are. I think everyone around us becomes better too. And ultimately, it all begins with an idea. So thank you very much.
We're going to do some Q&A?
No, did you want to? Sure.
Everybody wants to join in though, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's very exciting. I'll just. The second presentation to end the day is a new feature for NERD. That's not new. I think we've done it 2 or 3 years now. Where we're very happy to invite back a recent health science education graduate who is making strides in their education work, in innovation, curriculum design, being a leader in the education space, but who's also able to tie in to the theme of the day and the keynote address that we heard earlier in the day. And today, of course, that was Dr. Cheryl Holmes talking about ableism and inclusivity in medical education. So I'm very happy to welcome former HSE grad and someone who I consider my friend, Claire Ramlovind-Salanja, to please come up and to share her insights on inclusivity and social justice in midwifery curriculum development. Claire is a midwifery educator here at McMaster and one of the leaders of the new Masters of Midwifery program that we've just opened. So I won't take all your time.
So good afternoon, everyone. I've been given the honor to close Nerd Out 2026, something I really did not think I would be doing years ago when I sat in those same seats, as many of you. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone, the speakers today, for sharing their knowledge, their lived experience, and I also want to thank Dr. Lawrence Pearson, faculty, TAs, staff, everyone here at the HSED program for supporting my growth as a student, educator, and now colleague. I also want to thank Dr. Cheryl Holmes for sharing her work this morning. There are many parallels you're going to see in my presentation that link up with her talk this morning. My name, again, is Claire Ramlovind-Salanja. I'm a registered midwife and an assistant professor within the midwifery program here at McMaster. This afternoon, I'm going to share a story about what happened after my master's thesis. My talk, Beyond the Thesis, When Social Justice Learning Becomes Systems Change, will describe how work that started in education, and often usually stays there, can move beyond into broader spaces like admissions, national competencies, and health professions regulation. So why does any of this actually matter? Well, we're seeing more and more emphasis on social justice in health professions, education, and practice. However, as Dr. Holmes highlighted this morning, this work requires us to interrogate assumptions built into our systems, particularly around ideas like merit, competence, and who belongs. Because these systems often are working exactly how they were designed, to include some and exclude others. All of this being said, we are also aware that curricula are evolving, competencies are shifting, and there's growing acknowledgement that equity, diversity, and inclusion matter. But in many cases, the work stays at the level of curriculum. It becomes something we teach rather than something we intentionally reshape systems. So the question that has stayed with me is, what does it look like when this learning doesn't stop at the classroom doors? Keeping this in mind, this big broader question, I continue to think about systems change. Is there a way for education, practice, and systems to work together to challenge these assumptions built into healthcare? To make visible what often goes unseen and unnamed? To acknowledge that no system is neutral in how it was designed? With these thoughts in mind, my guiding question evolved. And something along the lines of, how can educational scholarship in social justice shift systems to better serve the public? And more specifically, what happens when curriculum becomes a lever for broader change in many, many ways? The thesis itself. So my master's thesis was first, you can think of it as the first stone I sort of threw into a still pool of water. And what followed were ripples, sometimes very big waves, that I couldn't have fully anticipated. And in retrospect, it was all about timing, opportunity, and relationships. It was during residency week that I was introduced to a paper authored by Metzl and Hansen. Little did I know that their concept of structural competency would be the springboard to my work and approach to social justice education. In their work, Metzl and Hansen discussed that structural competency requires health profession learners and practitioners to gain the skills to recognize and respond to systems structures upstream that directly influence health inequities downstream. This concept mapped really well to the project I was about to dive into. So what did the thesis actually do? My work focused on the Ontario Midwifery Education Program, which consists of a consortium partnership between Toronto Metropolitan University and McMaster University. I also consulted with all midwifery education programs across the country to gain a perspective on their approaches to social justice curriculum. In the end, the work did four main things. It defined social justice in the context of midwifery education. It identified key concepts that should be included. It integrated those concepts into existing curriculum. And then it mapped that work onto the Canadian competencies for midwives. These four stages allowed me to scaffold components of structural competency throughout the four-year degree. So on paper, this was a curriculum project. But in practice, it started to do something else, and ripples were forming. This is where things shifted. The ripples started to become visible. What started as curriculum work didn't remain contained within curriculum. It actually created space. It opened up new conversations, new questions, and new opportunities. The shift required a kind of individual and organizational unlearning where questioning assumptions about what counts as competence, what is valued in education, and who is seen fit for these spaces. This connects closely to the idea of confronting ableism and other embedded biases in education, recognizing that many of these systems are not neutral, even when they appear to be. As a racialized person, this work gave me a way to express my lived experience and use it as evidence to create systems change. And that's really where the rest of my story begins. Let's talk about some educational level impact. At the education level, the work didn't just influence curriculum, it shifted how we thought about the program more broadly. We took time to collectively build our own knowledge base, which then contributed to creating space for more intentional, equity-focused approaches to admissions, for example. It supported conversations and initiatives focused on increasing access to our program for Indigenous and Black applicants. While not perfect, we did see an opportunity to address admissions barriers, and we knew we just needed to make it happen. It took a year of planning and consultation, and we eventually constructed our own unique facilitated Indigenous application pathway and facilitated Black admissions pathway. Last year marked our first graduating class that came through these pathways, and now we're seeing these pathways being adapted in other health science programs. And importantly, this wasn't positioned as an add-on. It came from a reframing of what the program's values and desires to shift the classroom to be more representative of the community midwives we're serving. This ripple effect continued here. The admission doors were widening, which enabled me to constructively build relationships and foster a sense of belonging within the program with incoming Indigenous and Black students. In the long run, this change means the public would eventually receive racially concordant care, leading to better health outcomes. The next shift occurred simultaneously because we need to think about student support differently. We developed a virtual monthly support group for Indigenous, Black, and racialized students called Community, Connection, and Continuity. The 3C drop-in was initially hosted by a racialized staff member and myself, But soon, we had racialized TAs and sessional instructors dropping in to add their support to attendees because they also believed in the power of community. This has become a space for connection, for navigating experiences within the program, and for building a sense of belonging. It brings together students from all levels of the program, so I get to see senior students naturally provide perspective and guidance to junior students. Friendships are built and trust is earned. And while that program might seem small compared to changes to national competencies and health professions regulation, it's truly a critical part of how change takes hold. Looking at systems impact, the thesis also led to a few more initiatives and bigger waves. The work extended into national competencies for entry-level midwives. There were opportunities for me to engage with the Canadian Midwifery Regulators Council during the review of their Canadian competencies for midwives. Timing, opportunity, and relationships were key. The CMRC knew that it was time to shift away from the way they were thinking about midwifery competencies. They moved from clinical stages of care model to competency by role model, like CanMeds. As this architecture of the framework was being rebuilt into 7 new domain roles, they were also integrating social justice throughout. They did it the right way. They made space for an advisory group and midwives at large to ask difficult questions such as, where was social justice already present? Where was it missing? What language was being used? And how can it be made more explicit? This led to integrating cultural humility and anti-racism, inclusive and diverse population care, trauma-informed care, and digital and virtual care into each domain and subcategory. This moved the competencies from implicit to intentional and explicit. The expectation that midwives had a duty and responsibility to be structurally competent was mandated in statements like, midwives actively identify and dismantle colonial and discriminatory systems. And importantly, these changes were reflected not just in competencies themselves, but also in the supporting appendix to the Canadian Competency for Midwives, where these expectations are more clearly articulated and contextualized. So what we started to see is a shift from implied values to something that is much more concrete and actionable. Now you guys must all know where I'm going with this one. Guess what? Another riddle. The work moved further into regulation and governance. Through work at the College of Midwives of Ontario, particularly at the board level, this lens of social justice began to shape how we approach regulatory work. Recently, within the college's 2026 strategic framework, equity was further refined and explicitly added to guiding principles alongside accountability, transparency, and integrity. This wasn't just symbolic. It meant asking different questions at the board table. It meant that equity had to be normalized in decision-making processes, organizational priorities, and regulatory objectives. We also developed and applied an equity, diversity, inclusion framework, we developed an EDI framework that focused on areas like governance, decision-making, and accountability. Really embedding equity into how the organization operates, not just what it says. So over time, this influenced not just what decisions were being made, but how regulatory work itself was being understood, including how risk is defined, whose perspectives are included, and what it means to act in the public interest. And importantly, this kind of shift aligns with broader expectations that regulators not only protect the public, but they do so in a way that actively addresses systemic inequities. Alongside these more visible changes, there were also shifts in culture, a key thing we've been hearing throughout the day. I'll call it my undercurrent. I could see our culture changing by leading and observing how conversations happened, what could be said by whom, in what was prioritized, and in what was considered part of the organization's responsibility. These types of shifts are harder to measure, but they're often the most important in change, if change is going to last. Which I loved, was culture can eat strategy. So putting in the time and the energy into your culture is imperative. In the beginning, actually let me be clear about something. Missteps have occurred over and over, but we gave ourselves some grace to acknowledge those missteps, address issues or harms that were caused, and make adjustments along the way so that we can collectively grow as a team. In the beginning as chair, I made small changes at the board table. Things like who sat where, who spoke first, how discussions were facilitated, especially when disagreements were happening during decision making. Further to these subtle but significant shifts, our training days, which occurred the day before every board meeting, we explicitly decided that our learning needed to be focused on several aspects of social justice in the context of health professions regulation. We also wanted to learn as a group and hold space for curiosity. Topics such as anti-Black racism in healthcare, truth and reconciliation calls to action, Indigenous midwifery, human rights in the context of complaints and discipline cases, and deep listening, and much, much more. These investments in time and collective learning paved the way for an evolution of culture change because it intentionally fostered space for board directors, non-board committee members, and staff members to lead with curiosity and build trust with one another. Again, timing, opportunity, and relationship run true again. So let me bring it all together. When we look across all of this, what we see is not a straight line or a still pool of water. It's not that curriculum led neatly to systems change. Instead, it's more like a set of overlapping spaces, just like ripples of water that bounce off of one another. With education, learners, competencies, regulation, and governance, and social justice was that pebble or that stone or that boulder that started it all off. When we leave today, I want to give you a few key takeaways. First, curriculum work can be the starting point, but it should not be the end point. Second, educational scholarship can travel, but it often does so through timing, opportunity, and relationship. Third, small changes like student support structures and large changes like national competencies are deeply connected. Fourth, this work also reinforces that advancing equity often requires unlearning deeply embedded assumptions about competence, merit, and who belongs, and recognizing how these show up differently across systems. And finally, sustaining social justice work requires continuing beyond the thesis, even when the waters are rough and the horizon seems extremely far away in the distance. So in many ways, the most important part of this work wasn't the thesis itself, it was what the thesis made possible. Thank you.
We have a bit of space for questions for Claire, if there are any. Please do that.
I really enjoyed this presentation as someone that is in the same program that you graduated from that wants to make sure that I don't lose steam over time. But can you expand more on accountability in this process? Because you mentioned it, but I think I usually struggle with conversations around EDI because it's always like, let's do this, we need to do this. Equity is important, and let's form the policy, the governance, and all of that has happened. But if you're not there to be the one that's persisting, like you said, that social justice requires persistence. Who is holding who accountable? How do you actually get to that point? Because you can write policy and you can do all those things, but institutions are notorious for working around it anyway.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think over time what has happened, I'll give context. So I've been with this college and I've been here, I would say over the past, my time's been about 6 years, let's say from 2020 and onward. And so we've seen this evolution of let's just spit out every statement we possibly can, let's spit out every policy we possibly can. And you're exactly right, there was no accountability portion of that work. It just kind of went out there and we just saw what could happen. And the next phase that I'm sort of seeing happening now, 5-6 years into it, is exactly that. How do we hold ourselves accountable? And so in many spaces I'll see either there is advisory groups, or there's a bigger group of people contributing to policy construction, rather than just staff doing it in their little bubble and thinking that this might be the best way forward. I also see places where there are like anonymous or spaces where people can actually give feedback back in consultation to policies and holding folks accountable. I think there's also the culture piece where you say that out loud, that you are, as an organization or as an individual, I'm willing to hear where I have made a misstep, and I need to know how I can make these changes moving forward. So is it a perfect thing yet? No. Is there a step-by-step process to hold somebody accountable for the work that they put out? Probably. But right now, we're working through steps of allowing people to come back and give us feedback so that we can actually take it apart and figure out where we made a misstep. Yeah.
Sure.
There's so many things I love about what you did. So many. I mean, things like you created those pathways, but they weren't broken pathways. They continued on through, you know, your 3C monthly meetings. I thought that was very cool. I think you could rewrite the whole book on change management. I mean, you really accomplished a lot of change in a very short period of time, and it wasn't just opportunity. You were really prepared to meet that opportunity. I think the thing I love the most is that you started with a theoretical construct, one that really resonated with you, and it helped you drive your work right through. And can you expand a bit more for everybody on what that theoretical construct was and how it helped guide your work?
I think the piece that I would say is that at residency week, and I don't know if you're going to confirm this, as a brand new student, this piece landed up as one of the 3 or 4 readings we had to choose from. And I skimmed all of them, and this one kept bringing me back because it was naming this hidden idea of that the clients I'm working with all in front of me, while they may have many issues going on, the system was ultimately setting them up for some of these failures or health conditions or whatever. And it was the first time I saw this lens being placed on a person's health care. And so when it opened that window to say, yeah, we actually have to look upstream, like what happened up here to this person that led them to this place that we see them at, and then us having this accountability to understand, hey, hold on, the person who's not taking this XYZ medication, or the person who nutrition isn't the best, well, do they live in a desert? Do they live in a food desert where they can't get access to food? Do they have other circumstances, system circumstances that are holding them in a position where they can't get any better health care than what they have in front of them? It sparked something in me. It was an articulation of this unsaid circumstance of how structures are built and how things are laid out. And so knowing that things upstream affect what's happening downstream, and from the position of a learner and the position as a clinician, it really resonated in how we could structure curriculum in our program, and thinking about, sure, you need to be a really good clinician, you need to know, like, the arms connected to the body, which is connected. Like, we need to know the anatomy, we need to know all these pieces, but we also need to know that the person in front of us is human, and they come with so much around them, and that is kind of where that framework of thinking about what's happening upstream, we need to acknowledge that and react to it, was key.
Yeah. It's almost, it's like a threshold concept. You can't unsee it.
Yes, exactly, which is a piece I take into all my teaching at undergrad and the grad program, is this concept of like, you can't change anything until you can start to see it, and you start seeing it everywhere. So, yeah, thank you for the question, but that's exactly it. It just made sense in the real world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got a few more words to say before I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Sherville to wrap up the day today. As we've said multiple times, and you've heard from graduates from our program, Norman Education Research Day sits right in the middle of the HSED Residency Week. It's a core part of our curriculum, and it stands as a good opportunity to, are you going to click for me?
Do you want to do?
No, you click for me. It's a good opportunity to take a moment and recognize some of the successes for our students. So I'm just going to ask Samantha to do the first click, and we want to point out that we've had some excellent success in the Canadian and Ontario Graduate Scholarship awards competitions, and Julie, so you just asked this question here. Just sitting right in front of her. And Sarita Colson, up here in the back, has we also have the opportunity every year to recognize a number of students as outstanding students in our program for their success throughout their curriculums. These are folks that are finishing up the program, and we're really glad to celebrate Julia Howcroft and Lily Meyer and Jillian Moran and Danielle Porter for their
At the start of our morning, we had an opportunity to hear from the Health Professions Educator Award winner from 2025, Dr. Ruchen. It's now my big honor, and I'm quite excited to announce this winner for the 2026 Health Professions Educator Award. This is one of the preeminent awards that we offer in our faculty that is meant to recognize continued excellence in health professions education and scholarship. Nominees are senior faculty who have made contributions in a substantive way across a number of domains, including teaching, mentorship, education, scholarship, and research throughout their careers. These are the people that we look to, that we are inspired by, that help make the change in our programs and our schools. And so I'm very excited to announce the 2026 winner, Dr. Natasha Johnson. And give Dr. Johnson a chance to say something, but first I want to say about her, because I know how much she has influenced the delivery of education and clinical care in our community. Dr. Johnson is a professor in the Department of Pediatrics and the Associate Chair, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. She is the President-elect of the Canadian Pediatrics Society, and she's also the Chair of Diversity and Inclusion for our undergraduate medical education program. In 2023, she was the recipient of the YWCA Women of Distinction Award for her work in supporting and leading equity-deserving populations and marginalized youth through the development of a youth-specific clinic. It's had a profound impact in our Hamilton community. As a founding member of the Anti-Racism Coalition in the Department of Pediatrics, she's led transformative change in our healthcare, in our education systems, in our community. Dr. Natasha Johnson.
Bio is that I have social anxiety, so I feel like I need to provoke, but also I'm going to settle myself and try to express how deeply grateful I am to be in this position to receive this award today. I am deeply grateful and humbled. I also feel a little bit badass, especially with Dorothy, that is a nerd, that is socially anxious, so I'm really proud to be here today. I had the opportunity and pleasure to be here this morning as Dr. Mohit was talking about equity by design and our calling to challenge ableism and to focus on accessibility. She talked about the transformative power of educational systems. She also mentioned, and I really like this, that colonial systems have excluded certain stories consistently. And all of this resonated with me. Medical training and educational institutions have framed disability as incompatible with excellence. And this doesn't come from nowhere. We just heard about structural competence. If you have heard of the legacies by Anne Bishop, you will know that there are a number of legacies that have led to a number of different historically excluded and marginalized, and this leads to consistently poor outcomes amongst a number of different systems. Our educational systems, our health systems, our carceral systems. And so it doesn't come from nowhere. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about diversity and how it does strengthen medicine, not only diversity in terms of including those with accessibility needs, but we want to think about other groups of people who have been excluded. I am the first daughter born to my parents who immigrated to this country from humble beginnings in Jamaica. Last week, or the week before, I went from president-elect to the president of the Canadian Pediatric Society, the first Black president in its over 100 special about me that particularly, caused me to be in this place at this time. But there's been a series of changes, including structural changes, including language, including looking specifically at who's been excluded and thinking of ways of how to include them. So I am privileged to have accepted that role. I'm also a nerd, an education nerd. I went through a number of phases. My medical school phase, I always knew I wanted to be a pediatrician. I went through my residency phase, my fellowship phase, and then I thought I was done with learning, although my mother's an educator. How many of you have seen the fetus, the Black fetus? I'm seeing just a couple of hands. If you Google the Black fetus, there's one image that's going to come up. And in 2021, an image of a Black fetus that was created by Chidibere Ibe, a Nigerian medical student, went viral because it was the first time that many people in the world, including myself, who had been a clinician for decades, had ever seen a Black fetus represented. It was the first time that I had seen an image like myself represented amongst medical imagery. And so I just wanted to highlight the fact that because of slight omissions like that, I learned very clearly during my trajectory during medical school and residency that racism was not a topic that we were to discuss overtly. We could talk about vulnerable people and how we could help, but we were not allowed to label structures as being racist or to examine our complicity in these systems. Fortunately, following the death of George Floyd, there was a number of movements to make structural changes to be able to speak to these truths, and I've seen a lot of improvements since that time. And so I went back to school, sort of. I did a UBC EDI certificate, 170 hours, and I have focused this aspect of my career on health equity. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Before we go, a few thank yous. Thank you to Dr. Holmes for making the trip here to be with us today for the remainder of her additional time during residency week. Thank you for all of you for contributing. You can contribute even more by giving us feedback. We review it, we make changes, we make additions, we try to be responsive to what our community wants to say. And then also thank you to Miriam and Mel and Emily and Christina, and with a very special thank you to Samantha who made all of this work. And so I hope you're inspired. I certainly feel inspired. I hope you see this as an opportunity to present your own research, to think about your own innovations and think how you can advance and contribute to the education of our faculty. Have a great day.